Hello, and welcome to day 6 of Lamplighter. Just a couple of days ago, we were reading about Noah and the promise God made to him that he would never again destroy the earth by water. You remember that we read that God gave as a sign of that promise, or maybe as a seal of that promise, a rainbow in the clouds that still exists to this day as a reminder to us that God is a promise making, promise keeping God. God also calls Abram, as we've seen earlier. And in our reading today, we see that God verifies his promise to Abram in a number of different ways. Abram realizes that God has promised that he is going to bless all the nations of the earth through his descendants. But the problem is, Abram doesn't have any descendants. His wife Sarai is barren, has never been able to have children, and they are both getting along in age. Abram begins to be concerned, wondering if maybe God intends to bless him simply through his household servant, Eliezer. God communicates to Abram, "No, I'm going to bless you through your own son." Well, time passes since the promise has been made. Remember, Abram was 75 years old when God first makes this promise to him. Now, as we read along in the text today, some 11 years have passed. Now Abram is 86 years old. His wife Sarah is now 76 years old, and still no indication of how this promise is going to be fulfilled. So Abram and Sarai, principally Sarai, decide that they need to help God along in his promise. Sarai suggests that Abram take her handmaiden Hagar, have relations with her, and give birth to a son through whom God can bless the nations of the world according to his promise. So Abram goes with Hagar, Sarai's handmaiden, and Ishmael is born as a result. But God makes it very clear that even though he will also bless Ishmael, Ishmael is not the son of promise. As a matter of fact, God makes it very clear that he still intends to bless Abram and his offspring, his own offspring, that he will have along with Sarai. To communicate his commitment to this task, to this promise, God changes the names of Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. Just slight changes, but the names mean something. Abram's name means exalted father, but his new name, Abraham, means father of many nations. And so God is indicating his promise through the change of the name, and a very similar name change from Sarai to Sarah for the very same reason. It is an unbelievable promise, and yet God continues to do everything in his power to communicate to Abraham that he has not forgotten, that he is going to bless Abraham just as he promised he would do so many years earlier. Now, as we continue to read this story unfold, God has another seal of this covenant. It is the seal not only of name changes, but the seal of circumcision. Circumcision is not going to be just a physical hygienic act for all males. No, it's going to bear some very spiritual significance that will be with Abraham's people from this day forward. A way to remember a promise that has been made, a way to continue to keep that covenant that has been made with God. Interestingly, however, this covenant is a one-way covenant. It is one that God makes because God is faithful. We talked yesterday about the fact that Abraham is later known as the father of the faithful, but God doesn't choose him because of his faithfulness. The story is about God. The story is about God's promises, God's faithfulness to his promises, and his willingness to keep those promises, even when it seems from a human perspective that he may have forgotten. We're ultimately going to see that 25 years pass from the time God first makes that promise to Abraham until the time when God fulfills it in a very miraculous and astounding way. We serve an amazing God who still does amazingly wonderful things. And just as Peter will tell us many years later, time is no factor with God. To God, a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years is a day. It is simply us, his people, that need to put our faith and our confidence in Him. God keeps His promises. God keeps them in His own time. And it is up to us not to try to help Him keep the promises, but to simply take Him at His word, to believe Him and to obey Him. That's why we want to continue to be lamplighters. His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I pray that our faith will grow stronger along this time of study. We can draw closer to God. We can take God at His word. And even when it seems like nothing is happening, believing that God is a promise-making, promise-keeping God. I hope you have a blessed day.